Hey, good morning. Matt Allen here with Tactical Bassin. What I want to talk to you guys about today is something a little bit different. I got a request from somebody who watches the website. They wanted to see a video on how to properly break down a map. They had some questions about the details on the map, what they're really looking at, where are the flats, where are the points, where are the saddles, some of those unique features where some of us take it for granted. We look at that map and we've been doing it for years, we know our way around. Or if you've been on a lake a long time, you don't even look at the map. But for some people coming into a new lake or just trying to learn how to break down a map, you still need that detail information of, how does that piece of paper translate to on the water? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a map, we'll take a look at it, and we're going to break down some of those key features. I picked up the first map I had in my stack. It happened to be a map of Lake Fork out in Texas. It's not a fishery I've spent a lot of time on, but I've put in a little bit of time out there. So we'll talk a little bit about some of the features on that lake, maybe a few different areas. I'm not saying they're the best places to fish, but they're going to be some prime examples of what we're talking about. But first, let's talk about some of the key features you're going to be looking at. We'll be talking about points, secondary points, what the difference is between those. I mean, you hear guys on TV all the time saying, I caught them on secondary points, but what's that mean? When you're looking at a map, what is a secondary point? Flats, saddles, ridges, different things like that, so that when you get the map of your local lake, you can sit down, lay it out, and know exactly what you're looking at. Let's head over and take a look at that map. Alright, here we've got Lake Fork set out in front of us. We're going to zoom in and start talking about some of these key features. The first one I wanted to talk about was an example of a point versus secondary point. If you take a look at this great big arm going back in here, this is Little Caney Creek, and here on the left side of it on the map, or on the west side of it, this point, you've got the great big point sticking out here. That's a huge, or this one too, these are huge main lake points. But as you zoom in on them and you look down the side of those points, you got these smaller points going back in. These are secondary points leading into the coves. So you've got a big primary point on this side, and then you've got all these little secondary points going back in. That's all guys are talking about when they're talking about points and secondary points. Let's jump over here across the lake a little bit. What you've got here is you've got an island up close to shore. But then, as you come out, see, this is all underwater. If you can look at these lines, it's showing that everything above that's 13 feet. Everything above that is 3 feet or less. Okay, but it's not actually breaking the surface. So what this is, just a huge underwater ridge line that happens to be extremely shallow. So that's a prime example of a ridge. Let's see, where else can we jump down here? I'll show you a channel. Let's look at the actual dam. Here's the Lake Fork Dam. And right in the middle of it, you can see the old creek. It's this blue line going through here. If we follow this up, that's the original lake channel. Now it forks out and goes a bunch of different directions, but if we follow it up here, we'll follow it into Little Caney. You follow that all the way up, that's still that original channel going all the way back up in there. So that blue line running up the center, it's got some depth contours around it, but you can still see the blue line showing that original channel. So if guys are talking about getting out in the middle of a cove and fishing that channel, that's what they're talking about. But because before there was a lake here, that creek probably had some water running through it, obviously, some current, and it's going to eat away at those banks. And when it does that, it's going to leave some breaks on one side or both sides, especially when it makes a corner. So guys are going to get out and target fish sitting on those breaks. What else can we talk about here on this map? Let's see, let's find a saddle. A prime example of a saddle as we look out here, right here. Okay, here we're way out on the main lake. Let me back up, give you some perspective. We're out in front of the dam, one of the biggest points on the entire lake, and you've got this island out here, all by itself. But if you look at the contour lines, what that's telling you is there's shallower water between this island and these smaller islands. That shallow water is called a saddle. What that means is if you come anywhere out around the island, you're going to have deeper water, except where that island dips down and then attaches to these other islands and the main bank. So that little in between, that shallow water, is a saddle, and bass will line up in those because if they're wanting to feed bait fish, especially in wind or current situations, the bait are going to get pushed and they'll have to go up and over that saddle, and the bass will just line up in there and feed on them as they come through. Those are just a few key features. Hopefully that gives you a little help. Like I said, I don't fish Lake Fork a ton, but this is a great map to just stop and take a look at. You know, one more key feature on this map that we don't see a lot of other places is these borrow pits. Now, there's borrow pits, and then there's something else in here too. Let's go ahead and find one. Here's some prime examples. That little guy there, that guy there. See, Lake Fork was farmland before they decided to turn it into a reservoir. When they flooded it, they absorbed a lot of farm ponds. If your map has features like this on it, just spread out, what that means is that there were these pre-existing ponds before they ever built the lake. Typically, those are going to have a dam on them. So what that does for you is tells you that you know a key feature out in the middle of open water that these bass are going to use, because that dam will stand up off the bottom. It's a perfect place for those bass to ambush from. Going back to these borrow pits, they're basically the same thing. The borrow pits are where they took material out in order to build the dam itself. But what they've done is they've created these incredibly deep locations, sometimes very close to shore. So I'll tell you right now, if I spent more time on Lake Fork, this is one of the key areas I would focus in on personally. I'd focus in here, these two big main lake points, probably this long guy here. Now you've got to understand, Fork has an unbelievable amount of trees in it, an unbelievable amount of cover. There's probably fish everywhere. But if I were personally looking to target giant fish, these are the features I would be targeting, because as you look at them on the map, as I back out, there's one there, 2, 3, and then this deeper area, these borrow pits up along this point. These are prime main lake areas that these fish, if they want to feed on bait fish that are on the move, if there's bait fish in this half of the lake and they want to get over here, what do they have to do? They have to come around the end of these 2 points. So why wouldn't a big bass just sit out here on the end of these? They're going to be away from the boat traffic, but they're still not going to have to move very far to eat. Same thing here. You're not going to have as much boat traffic out here on this shallow water as you would up here on the bank. And they have all that deep water access to get down fast if they start feeling uncomfortable. So those are the sorts of things you want to look for on your lakes to target big fish. Again, there's going to be fish everywhere in a lake like this, but those are the places that personally I would focus my time in on if I was going to be there for a while. I hope this helps. Hope that gives you a little bit more insight into how these maps work and what you're looking for. Talk to you soon.